All right. Thank you all for joining. Good afternoon and welcome to this panel discussion where we are going to hear captivating stories from some high-profile entrepreneurs in the space sector. First, let me introduce ourselves. My name is Johan, and together with Kim and Jacob, we are part of the YPAG Young Entrepreneurs Working Group, which is engaged with all topics related to entrepreneurship. And today we are moderating this panel discussion. Just from a high-level perspective, our group follows three main goals. First, we want to encourage entrepreneurial spirit at ESA. Second, we want to build a network of like-minded ESA professionals. And third, we want to establish an active communication link between us, the young professionals, and the space industry. And now let us continue with some 2-minute self-introduction of each of our speakers, starting from left to right, beginning with Mike Lawton from Oxford Dynamics and Oxford Space Systems. Mike.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to talk this afternoon. So yes, I'm Mike Lawton, founder and ex-CEO of Oxford Space Systems, and now on to my new venture, Oxford Dynamics. But let me tell about my history and how I came to be a space entrepreneur. My background is electrical and electronic engineering, and I've always worked in high-end R&D environments, and I've always enjoyed working at the cutting edge of technology and tackling really tough problems. And I quickly worked out that I was actually better at leading people in a group rather than being an engineer. And then when the opportunity came to actually start my first company, I'm going back now nearly 18 years when I took the entrepreneurial plunge. I quickly proved that I could be a much better leader than I could be an engineer. And I'm actually now on to company number 5. So Oxford Dynamics is number 5 for me. But along that journey, I've had a couple of exits. I certainly didn't win the lottery, more like winning a high-end raffle, but enough money to buy property and a silly car for a while. And that led me to have a great foundation in place, a lot of experience dealing with business angels to found Oxford Space Systems at the back end of 2013. So just over, where are we, 8 years ago when I founded OSS, and took that from a blank sheet of paper. And I'm very proud to say that the ESA incubator turned me down when I presented Oxford Space Systems to them. They didn't see the viability, I think, in the business at the time. But I'm very proud to say I managed to grow that from just myself and a blank sheet of paper to the highest valued space tech startup in the UK currently. And along that journey, I was awarded Barclays Bank Tech Startup Entrepreneur of the Year in 2018. I've also been Business Person of the Year for the tech sector in the UK, and a whole bunch of other awards along the way, including Oxford Space Systems itself as a company being Best Tech Startup in the UK, I think in 2017, which is a great testament to the fantastic team at OSS and the great engineering that the team have done. But I stood down as CEO of OSS just under 2 years ago to concentrate on the next one, which is Oxford Dynamics. And I was told a couple of days ago that our complete lack of a website, in fact, just a logo, if you go to the Oxford Dynamics website, is like catnip to investors. So I've had no end of investors contacting me asking what we're up to at Oxford Dynamics, and there's an opportunity to invest in the new venture. What I can say about Oxford Dynamics is, although we're less than 2 years old, for a startup, we're actually cash flow positive, which is really unusual. And the reason we've managed to achieve that is we're doing some really interesting work for the UK MOD. And what I can say is we're working on a new generation of artificial intelligence together with some clever hardware that will allow us to give a unique space situational awareness capability to assets on orbit. And that leads us into working with the UK Space Command on how we can go about protecting assets from collision with other satellites, from space debris and nefarious docking activity. There's also some really interesting terrestrial applications for the AI we're developing. But along that journey, plenty of experience of dealing with business angels, VCs, both good and bad. So I bear plenty of scars that I'm happy to talk about during the panel session. So that's me, and look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists and some really exciting
Q&A.
Awesome, thank you. Let's follow this with Ibrahim, Head of Business Development and Sales from Rocket Factory Augsburg.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. Thanks for the kind introduction. Yeah, my name is Ibrahim. I joined the company 3 years ago, so around 5 months after its foundation, as one of the first commercial employees, and started as a project manager. And I grew together with the company. We were back then 20 people. I was number 23. Now we are 130 people. We are now at the stage where we grow from a startup to a medium-sized company with all its perks and problems, I would say. And yes, it's, for me, 3 years went by really, really quickly. And this is, I think, one of the most beautiful things in a startup. You're just so busy working and growing and developing your own skill sets that years, and I'm sure Mike can agree on that, are just passing by like days. I'm very looking forward to the panel discussion. Some of the panelists I already know. For the others, I'm very looking forward to get to know them, and I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion here.
Thank you. Let's follow this with Arthus Pourcel, Deputy Project Manager at Venture Orbital Systems. Arthur.
Potentially still muted. It seems he's frozen. So
No, he's not frozen. Arthur, can you hear us?
we can't hear you.
Yeah, let's continue with the next person and then come back to Arthur later. Next person is Eivind Liland, CEO of Orbital Machines.
Yes, thank you. I'm Eivind Liland, founder of Orbital Machines, and this is my second startup. I was earlier in a different field. I co-founded the data center company Swarm64, which was recently acquired. And in that company, we took kind of a traditional route of VC financing. In this one, we have done a bit of a different route that has to do with our origins. So we are a spin-off from an organization that calls themselves the world's only manned amateur space program, Copenhagen Suborbitals, where I was working as a volunteer, working on the pumps for the rocket engine for their manned vehicle Spica. Basically, they've been working since 10 years with trying to send the first person to space to the Kármán line on a vehicle built by volunteers. And they are, since January last year, they are working on kind of the big rocket after launching a bunch of smaller sized demonstrators. So we are then, of course, Orbital Machines. We are a company specializing in electric propellant pumps for launch vehicles and spacecraft. Basically, we are leveraging the development of the maturation of the new space industry, as it's we believe takes the same path as other industries like aircraft and the automobile industry, and starts to standardize more. We want to be a supplier of standardized propellant pumps for the industry. That's, as I said, this is my second startup that I have founded. And we have raised money mainly through equity crowdfunding and soft funding, and we are now raising money from VCs in our next round. So different path than my previous startup, and also a very exciting and different way to do it this time. So I'm happy to be here.
thank you. Let's continue with Thomas Sinn, CEO and founder of Dcube. Thomas.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm Thomas Sinn from Dcube. We are a SMA or startup based in Munich. We are developing a new space, nanosat, small sat release mechanism and deployable structures, mostly going into solar arrays and more other deployables. And actually, I like it very much to be in this round here because I actually, when I finished my studies, I tried to stay away from having my own company as far as I can, because I saw it with my brother. He is in informatics, and he is had a startup right from the get-go when he finished his studies, and I saw all these troubles he had, and I thought, why to go through all of that? Why not just work in a normal company, do the 8 to 5 job? But when I was working at ESA and traditional space agency and classical space industry, and I saw that, yeah, there can be things done differently, better, I jumped over my shadow and started Dcube 3 years ago. We are quite successful so far. We were able to also raise seed investment last year. And this year we were awarded the best upstream company in Europe on the internationalization, because most of our customers actually come outside of Europe, because especially in new space, we see this is the companies outside Europe are driving development here, and we should not be left behind in Europe. This is what we are trying to change at Dcube. So I'm very much looking forward to this panel.
Perfect. So let's cycle back to Arthur. Arthur, can you hear us?
Unfortunately, at least we cannot hear you. Good. Okay, so I'll make a quick introduction for Arthur while he figures out his problems. So Venture Orbital is a French company, if I'm not mistaken, from Eivind in northern France, I think. They build a launcher, a rocket, same as Rocket Factory, Augsburg, but they are more dedicated to nanosatellites, so between 70 and 80 kilograms. And what's really interesting about them is also that they want to make a fully 3D printed engine.
Okay.
And there we go, Arthur.
Nice.
Okay, now we can.
Sorry for the issue. I don't know where it comes from. But yeah, so I don't know where I stopped you. Just to make it quick. So I'm very glad to be invited here. I think it's my first panel discussion, and well, that's a great start, I would say. So, well, yeah, I just wanted to tell you how I came to work at VOS and what we do. So quickly, I heard about this project at the very beginning. There was this guy named Stanislas that is now our CEO. And he had the project to create a company that would make launchers for very small satellites around 50 kilograms. And yeah, I was just very eager to hear about that. And I told myself, yeah, that's the opportunity I want. And I asked him to go to a bar to discuss about the project. I think we spent almost half a day in this bar. We discussed about what he wanted to do with the project and everything. And in the end, he just bought me the beer and took me in. So that's why I'm here today. And what we do at VOS is developing a nano launcher, micro launcher that's called Zephyr. And that will be able to send up to 70 kilogram payloads onto low Earth orbits around 2024. So that's what we do here at VOS.
Very well. All right. Thank you very much. And a warm welcome again also from my side to all the speakers that took the time for us today. I'm very looking forward to the conversation. And yeah, as the audience now was introduced, we have multiple CEO and founders and also early entrants to this dynamic space sector. And especially on this topic, I want to start off with a general entrepreneurial spirit in mind. There's at least a stigma that the space sector might not be the ideal sector to start such endeavor. We have high ROAs oftentimes, we have long lead times in general, and maybe high barriers to entry for new ideas. So I think it's really interesting for everyone to listen to this, to find out what made you the jump to start the endeavor in the space sector, maybe compared to other sectors, and what are the unique opportunities that an entrepreneur can encounter once they join the sector. Maybe we can start off with Mike, who had companies in and outside of the space sector, to give us a little bit pep talk for the space sector itself.
I think I'm preaching to the converted here. Hopefully that's just a test right on cue behind me. So what, would you like to go to a different speaker while we sort out the alarm in our system, and we'll come back? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So same idea might apply to Dcube with the recently founded decision to make the business and then in the space sector after being previously unsure about doing the entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So when I look back, when I started in space, there was only the opportunity that you go to the big three companies, so Airbus, Thales, and OHB. But recently, just within the last decade, it became at all possible to do something in space. We are living right now in the right time to fund your own company also in space, because the barriers of entry are getting lower and lower. There is hundreds of startups, hundreds of space companies out there, and they all need services to launch satellites into space. They need components, need subsystems. So you don't need to necessarily go down the agency road, go through the national projects, and this makes it much easier to get an entry into the market quickly. And especially looking at how willing these new companies are to take also a risk for faster development, that brings in then completely new players. Where in the traditional space industry, there was like, if you have not flown it before, you will not fly in on our mission. And this is the nice thing that we see right now with many of our customers. They got our products before we even had the flight heritage. And this would not have been possible just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm not sure if the alarm is sorted, but I think the general application of people willing to take risk is very beneficial for the space sector, obviously. So, Mike, you coming over from a different sector, was this already on your mind when you made this decision?
Yeah, well, the building isn't burning down, fortunately, so I can talk. Yeah, I came from another high-end. I actually came from the telecom sector. Was the last major venture that I was involved in. But there was a lot of parallels, high barriers to entry, actually, a lot of risk aversion to take on board a new technology. So I saw a lot of parallels between high-end telecoms and the space sector. But you flip those to being an advantage. High barrier to entry is great, because it means once you're in the club, the drawbridge still remains there for competitors to follow you. And I think probably Thomas touched on it. You find your niche. There's so many opportunities in the space sector, especially now. It's such an emergent sector. Anybody who says they can predict the future of new space is either deluding themselves or they're lying. There is just so many opportunities out there. But I will say one thing. I think all entrepreneurs have a streak of sadomasochism in them. I mean, why the hell would you go and start your own company? You know, it is not going to be, as Thomas said, an 8 to 5 job. You know, you are going to be putting in very, very long hours. There's no such thing as a holiday. And I'm sure every other founder who's listening or on this panel will agree. There's no such thing as a day off. You may physically be away from the office, but your brain never stops thinking about your business and the problems you're going to work through. So you've really got to be convinced you're going to do this. So I would say whatever element whatever niche you're choosing to pursue, you've really got to enjoy it. You've got to, it's not a job, it becomes a passion, an absolute obsession that you're going to deliver that. And I think that provides the rocket fuel to get you through to a successful business. But in terms of investment, Thomas absolutely hit it on the head. There's plenty of money around at a national level where you don't need to go through the bureaucracy of legacy routes to obtaining funding. And what I found, certainly in the investment community, classic kind of fear versus greed, fear that this is going to take a long time to mature technology until an investor can see a return on investment, but greed, kind of FOMO, fear of missing out on opportunities. And we've seen in the UK, and I think across Europe, the emergence of much more patient capital that is willing to go on the long haul to develop a space business, especially those businesses developing space hardware. Stuff going above the atmosphere is going to take a lot longer than a software play.
Yeah, and this brings us nicely to the topic of funding, because that's maybe the most important part. We all want more money than we can have. So even though the space sector sounds amazing to us space nerds, traditional investors might be very skeptical to invest in space startups with, well, what can be perceived as large timeframes, huge capital requirements, and large risks compared to other sectors, for example. So on this panel, we have several different experiences, everything from traditional venture capital to space agency and governmental funding to even crowdfunding. So maybe we will start with the most interesting one from Eivind. Orbital Machines, you did the crowdfunding round.
Yeah, no, we didn't do one, we did 3. So we've done 2 rounds of equity crowdfunding in Norway on a platform called folkeinvest.no. and 1 round on Seeders Europe-wide. And we've raised around €1 million in all over those rounds in equity crowdfunding. And we also backed that with various grants. So we raised a total of €2 million across those 2 methods, and that's before bringing in any venture capital. So yeah, that's doable. That's a possible route, even for a company that sells to businesses, sells a product that consumer cannot buy. If it is one that inspires people and kind of has something to do with a future vision that people believe in. And yeah, I think that me and many other people believe that we are just at the start of a new space age that is going to be very exciting, and there's going to be huge growth in the opportunities that are going to come up for all kinds of applications. We specialize in electric propellant pumps, which is going to be needed for almost everything. That's what we that's basically our pitch. So standardization and yeah, just identifying the things that are going to be big are the keys for getting investors.
So especially on a crucial topic like funding, what do you think, or what would you recommend for an entrepreneur who wants to go the crowdfunding route to be most important, if this is your approach in comparison to venture capital?
Yeah, so there's a difference between the type of Kickstarter crowdfunding and the equity crowdfunding that we did. Just to clarify that, in equity crowdfunding, you actually sell shares in the company. So it's like a normal investment round, except that there's very many investors. So like legally, it's the same thing. So that is an option that not everybody might know about. And one of the big platforms there is Seeders in Europe. Another one is Crowdcube. Yeah, then you just have to I think the key thing there, if you go that route, is to kind of sell a vision that people can get excited about and believe in. It's not that different from selling to from pitching to VC investors. It's just yeah, a little bit the same, a little bit different.
Interesting. Is there anyone on this panel that can compare, that has both traditional venture capital and governmental funding, and can kind of compare the two solutions? And what should you approach? Maybe you should ask ESA for funding, or should you go to like fast and risky venture capital?
So maybe I can jump in here, or Mike, you wanted to also. Okay,
you're going to say more intelligent things than me, Thomas. So I'll pick up on anything you know.
Yeah. So yeah, for us, we are actually going down this double road to get some funding from governments through ESA, through Germany, through the Bavarian government, but we also collected VC funding. And the nice thing with the VC funding, even though you need to give up shares, but it's money that you can directly invest in your development, and you don't need to do too much reporting and too much meetings on how, from the technology side, you will proceed. So that is the nice thing to do there. On the other hand, for more advanced developments where it might not be an investor case, or you cannot convince the investor, that's also a couple of things behind the deployables that we have. Here we need to go the route with government funding. Sometimes it comes with some strings attached, especially on the reporting, that we need to see in the long term, do we spend more time in just checking all these reporting things, how much time we spend on the bureaucracy, and how much time it is actually spent on technology development. And if it is not as slowing us down in comparison to competitors in the US that got VC funding to do exactly this development, where here in Europe, it is just not there yet. So yeah, we have to see over the next months, years, but our idea is to get away from VC and to get away from government funding and only get money from our customers. That's the goal.
Yeah, picking up on what Thomas said, yeah, the best source of money you can ever get is from your customers, because it's validating your products. It shows that you've got or you're developing technology that your customers want in preference over all their alternatives. It's a great way of validating and building value in your business. With Oxford Space Systems, actually, there's 3 sources of funding. We pursued national funding from our own UK space agency, which had a certain level of bureaucracy associated with it. Obviously VC funding, and there's obviously pros and cons of that, but also from our own Ministry of Defence. And we actually thought that was going to be a very bureaucratic route, but we've seen actually a complete change in how the MOD wants to fund and support emerging technologies. And in fact, we found that the easiest source of funding to get a very agile decision-making progress and a complete focus on the results and technology development rather than tedious form filling and paperwork. And that was really instrumental in the high-speed growth of OSS being able to work directly with the UK MOD. I think that the most painful source of funding we ever secured was unfortunately from the European Space Agency, due to the sheer level of bureaucracy involved in the application process, and then the long wait to get a decision to know whether you fund the money or not. And a startup effectively goes into a state of stasis. You know, do we have the funding or don't we? We've got to wait many, many weeks, if not months, for a decision. So you can't really move the business forwards until you really know if that money's going to drop in. And then, of course, once you've got it, the reporting process into the agency, yeah, is a surprise for those that have never gone through that path before. So yeah, there's no such thing as free money, but the best money always comes from your customers.
I would like
That's a very fair
to pick up on Mike's point. So I think he's right on. I think money or funding from your customers is really the way to go. So far we have secured 7 launch contracts before first launch, and our strategy now was, so currently we are closing out the B round. So we went through seed funding, through Series A. We chose the route to have a mixed balance between strategic investors, which bring more to the table than just money, and having an interest in your business itself, rather than just going in and exiting with a factor of 10. But because the reason for that was that, especially in the very beginning, you can concentrate on technical progress. You can concentrate on your development to such a stage where you can present it to customers which would buy in. I think from our end, this was really the right decision to go with strategic investors, which was in our case OHB and MT Aerospace, to be at a stage where we could sign launch contracts. And from here on, we really have multiple options on the table to get in more VC money or less, or other strategic investors. But what we also did, I think as a one of the first here in Germany, is we gave also shares in the very beginning to our employees as a motivational boost, and also as, I mean, if you're a startup, you're putting all your funding, all your money into the development, and you cannot pay as companies like Airbus, Thales, OHB, and people are really working day and night. And in order to give them a piece of the cake, we have given, and we give new employees always shares in the company. And I think this was a great mixture to have a strategic investor, to have other sources of money like VC, but also employee funding, employees, where employees could also invest their own money. And this was, I think, for us now a real good setup.
Yes, thank you so much, and that makes perfectly sense also from a recruitment perspective, I would assume, to have a good motivation in general for getting high talented people.
There's always somebody who could pay anyone more, right? And sometimes people have situations in life where money is really a very important thing, or the most important thing through that time. But if we can give them a perspective to have a big piece of the cake, I think this is really crucial to really have a steady motivation throughout the team.
Yes, that makes perfectly sense. That's very nice. Thank you.
Perfect, nice. So
should we next one?
yeah, so
we have one question from the audience, which as you know, we try to find we've tried to open this for everyone who is generally interested in the entrepreneurship, and it might appear like a more grounded questions for you guys, but I think it's a very, very interesting point for anyone who would be looking for investors. It is you want to ask, what do your investors actually get in return for giving you money? What is the outcome for them? I assume, as we already heard, parts of it is shares, so there would be ownership within the company, and therefore also with all profits associated. But is there other reasons for investor to give you money?
Mike?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. There's normally a lot in it for investors. So if we're looking at equity investors, we typically have VCs and business angels. Business angels tend to be high net worth individuals, and they invest in sectors that they either have experience in or they find really interesting. And they basically get bragging rights when they go to the next cocktail party. And one of my business angels in Oxford Space Systems said, and it's a brilliant quote, he said, look, investing is like the fashion industry. I want to be seen to be investing in kind of what's hot and interesting. And I've always been interested in space. So to say that I now own a chunk of Oxford Space Systems gives me great bragging rights. So I thought that was very honest of them. And for VCs, obviously a little less flippant in their response. What I've noticed with the VCs that I've worked with, they try and put together portfolios within that current investment fund that have a lot of synergies. And if they can bring companies together, either to be customer supplier relationship, that helps build the value of each business, and maybe even mergers within that same fund. So I think VCs tend to look for complementary features between their investment portfolio, and that does have benefits for the VCs as well as the companies as well.
So I hope that OHB is bragging about us, but for us, the interest of OHB why to invest in us was quite clear. They're building satellites. They have a huge backlog of hundreds of satellites, and they invest in a company which is really creating the most cost competitive launch service for 1.3 tons into LEO. And this is, I think, one of their most let's say, this is in their value stream, one of the biggest pain points, that launch services are still not frequent enough and very, very expensive. And I think for them, it's quite obvious why they are investing in us.
Yeah, strategic interest, I think, especially in the space sector, also makes a lot of sense. How would this be for the crowdfunding from Eivind, or in this case, the bigger spectrum? If you have so many investors, there probably is not much strategic possible for a small share, is it?
Yeah, I think so. In this case, I imagine that many of our investors, and also from talking to many of them, and by the way, we have almost 1,000 investors, so there is a lot of that's a lot of investors, and you know, for them, it's kind of part of being a part of a journey as well. So I imagine that a lot of people who invest in companies through those platforms are, you know, half in there for the money and half because they just believe in the thing and it's going to be awesome and let's make that happen. And that's something that I feel like as well, you know, as a founder, I'm totally there for, like, this is awesome, let's make this happen. So I like having that kind of shared motivations. I think that's good for the company.
For sure, especially for sharing the same goal will always be helpful in the long run.
Perfect. Now
let me add one more thing, is that we have had several instances where we have found people amongst our shareholders that could help us with various things. So that's another benefit of having that large pool of people that you can communicate with and possibly get tips from, for people who can help with this and that, or create connections or whatever.
That makes a lot of sense, also with everybody benefiting from a productive input by being invested. Very well.
All right. Now let's switch topic. Let's talk about failure. So all of you have currently a very successful and robust stance. Was it always like that, or do you have did you guys have to fight some obstacles along the way? What are your greatest bottlenecks, and what did you learn from them? Maybe we can start with Arthur, as a person who was present at the very beginning of the company. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your experience on this subject?
Well, absolutely, and that's a very interesting subject. So for us, I think the hardest obstacle we went through was to create the company during the COVID crisis. I think that's nothing you want to have when you create a company, so we made it, but it was very hard. And I think from this we learned patience, because you have always to take into account delays that you haven't the possibility even to think about at the beginning. And also you create a really strong team spirit. We were at this time, we were around 10 to 15 people in the company. So it creates a link between each others. And also I would say the final one is also that it creates a different mindset in the company. Like today, we have a lot of co-workers that work remotely in their homes, and that's something that just I would say came with the COVID. So that's great that we have it now, I would say.
You want to go something else?
Happy to give you a couple of horror stories and failures if you want. So with a previous business, before I got into the space business, I learned the hard way that when you take investment, it really is a two-way street, and you should see that you're interviewing your investors as much as they're interviewing you. I ended up in a previous venture, sat around the board table being threatened by our chairman, literally threatened by the chairman. I thought, this has gone south really quickly. I need to check this guy out a little bit more. So I did, and found out that he'd been in prison for blackmail and actual bodily harm. So I thought, okay, I need to exit this one pretty quickly. So managed to engineer a trade sale of that previous venture. And then at Oxford Space Systems, we grew really, really quickly. And if I could have my time again at OSS, I would spend much more time focusing internally with the team, getting the team to work much more cohesively together. Because when you hire really smart people, they tend to have very strong opinions, and therefore getting all that creative energy aligned and in the right direction, and stopping tribalism building with various departments in the company is an eternal challenge, and I think almost a full-time job in itself. And then finally, totally agree with Arthur. I started Oxford Dynamics, or we started Oxford Dynamics in the middle of the global pandemic. So hiring folks who you've never met to be part of your team, and also they're in another country, it's not really for the faint-hearted. Yeah, you've got to really trust the people that you're working with, and just take a leap of faith. Okay.
If I may add something, it's for us really the biggest failure, or let's say biggest mistake, what I personally did building up my team, was looking at CVs and just going through, okay, what this person has done so far, rather than just talking to them and understand what kind of personality they are. Because I don't know, piling up different let's say certificates and etc. really doesn't need to be very important if you are in a startup, in a very dynamic environment where responsibilities also shift on a daily basis, depending on some availabilities from people, or like if you split the team, half goes to Sweden to test for testing, for example, you really need people with hands-on mentality. And I personally looked always at, okay, which university these people go to, which kind of certificates do they have, etc. And I ended up, or my team is now composed of people which don't have, let's say, the best certificates or any at all, but these are the most motivated people which share the same spirit, and they have underwent a tremendous growth personally and professionally. And this was the biggest learning from my end. And coming back to the COVID situation, so we have now more than 130 people from more than 30 nations. So we have really a very international team. We are used to have interviews via Zoom because the people are all over the world. And for us, this case also gives us also responsibility to be a family for these people. They're leaving everything at home just to come here to work at Rocket Factory. And they're here all day, and they have really not so many people outside of work which they are in contact with. And what we had before the COVID crisis was really having every week a team event, Friday evening beers, activities on the weekends. And with COVID coming in, we saw a really tremendous change in the motivation of people, because everything was forbidden. You couldn't go out, you couldn't have some beers here because we were really strict with the COVID measures. And we needed to try to find a way to have a solution there, because like Mike said, if you're growing so much, you don't want to have tribalism in your company. This is really, you don't want to create a toxic environment where departments are fighting over budgets and projects, but to really keep the startup phase where Arthur is now in. They are now, I think, below 50 people. So everybody knows everyone, and their girlfriends and their boyfriends and their parents. But if you're 130 people, you don't have this anymore. And it's a full-time job, like Mike said, is to keep the team together.
Oh, that's very insightful, and at least for me, and probably also for some other people, really refreshing and off topic that the mentality is such a high standard for stand-up. That's very, very nice to hear for everyone applying, I assume, as well, besides the own entrepreneurship.
Yeah, maybe as a side question. So in IT and software development, there is this mindset of fail fast and learn faster. The question is, like, is this a mindset that you follow as well? And if yes, like, how do you apply this in an industry, in the space industry, where you most of the time you only have like one shot?
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here. The question is where you fail. You don't want to fail on your customer side, because also for us, if we bring a mechanism that does not deploy the satellite, then yeah, that's not acceptable. We still need high reliability. But what we are doing is we are designing and building prototypes as quickly as possible and testing them. And because only with failures we learn, and we just continue building prototypes, iterating it until the product is perfect. But this is all what we are doing on our side, with some help of pilot customers that point us in the right direction. But when it's the final product, at least for us, it needs to be 99.99% working.
Well, maybe if I could add something, I really like the idea of prototyping and learning from failure. And I think that's the problem we have when we say there's only one chance. When you look at, for example, I would say SpaceX and Astra, if I'm right, they made it only on their 4th attempt of launch. And I would say that's the thing we have to also carry in Europe. If you have, for example, the RFA launcher that fails on the first launch, we want them to have a second opportunity. We want them to make it through a second, even a third, and maybe a 4th launch to make it finally to develop their launcher, because that's how you can create new projects. You can have the people that are really passionate about space to continue to be passionate about space in Europe, and also to carry this vision to say, okay, the Americans are not the only one that can do it. We also can do great things.
So yeah, on that point, Europe versus the world. I mean, we have several huge and wildly ambitious new space companies like SpaceX, Rocket Lab, or Virgin Galactic, making a success outside of Europe. So what actually makes Europe attractive for new space startups, and what do we have to do? What do we have to change to make Europe the next Silicon Valley for space?
Maybe I can jump. Yeah, go for it. No, go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
I will keep it short. So I think the biggest difference, apart from the obvious that you have lots of funding in the US, also by the MOD, I think the biggest difference, if you look to US and to Europe, is that everybody loves space in the USA. It's really it's the mindset of people that everything which has to do with space is cool, it's fashionable. If you look at fashion, everybody is running around with NASA logos. People who have no ideas about rockets, but it's really, if there's a rocket launch, it's for them national interest. If you look at the launches, pictures from launches, there are hundreds of people viewing it. While in Europe, I don't think if outside our space bubble, there are so many people watching the Ariane launching. I think one of the obvious differences from my point of view is that Europe needs to be more excited about space and all the opportunities and cool technologies and all the things which might happen up there. And I think the importance is to really educate the broader public how cool space is. I mean, we know it, but it's quite a small bubble though.
I think one thing we can do is I think it's also dependent on the investment community. We still have incredibly short time frames for traditional VC investment in the UK, well, in Europe and the UK. And the patience does actually seem to be a lot greater in the US. So we remind folks that SpaceX is over 20 years old. You know, you don't suddenly have a successful space company. We need to allow companies a gestation period to reach a decent valuation. That's why we have far more unicorns in the US than we do across Europe. So ways of incentivizing or working with VCs to give them longer than, well, a typical fund is 10 years, but in reality, a VC is going to look to start trade sales at year 6, year 7. The last thing they want to do is get to the last year or two of their fund, because they know potential acquirers they will know the fund needs to exit, and they will use that to leverage down a company valuation. So realistically, you've got a 7-8 year runway with traditional VC investment. So we need funding mechanisms that break that cycle. And that's where business angels come in, but we don't have incredibly deep pocketed business angels in Europe. So our access to ready capital we can invest is a lot smaller, which means we need to be more innovative. And that's where we need to kind of spot those niches. But as Ibrahim said earlier, we're really crap at raising the excitement and profile of the space sector across Europe. And I looked into this. I thought everybody, even if they don't drive a car, can probably name 5 car brands. And you go and ask someone in the street, because they all use space technology every day, can you name me one space company in Europe? They can't. Why is that? And if you look at the amount the automotive industry spends on brand awareness and raising its profile, it's approaching almost 10% of revenues. If you look at how much the space sector spends in raising its profile, it's less than 1%. So it's an order of magnitude less. So it's no real surprise that we live in our own little bubble and get a bit frustrated that the wider European and the wider world hasn't really got excited about space. It's because we're really crap at profiling ourselves and raising it. So I think that's probably the one thing we can do. We need to stop being humble engineers and humble entrepreneurs, and perhaps sing from the rooftops a lot more about this fantastic industry and its growth potential.
That is
yeah. If it's possible, just wanted to ask a quick things on what Mike said. On my point of view, it's also very linked to the failure we talked about before. I think the investors, they need to accept more risks. That's what differentiates us from the US. They accept very much more risks, and sometimes it doesn't work, but when it works, it makes SpaceX, for example. So I think that's the difference also.
That's a very nice and also a fairly uniform take, which I think is really interesting that the same points are pointed out here. But on this note, all of you did decide to work for or start up a business within Europe. What would you say for if any of the listeners would have the same dream and start a company now? What are the benefits of Europe? What can we leverage from this market?
Well, I think there is a lot happening now, so we should appreciate that. So there's a huge number of spaceports opening up. One in Norway. The Norwegian government has approved funding for for Andøya spaceport. At least 2 of the German launch vehicles are launching from there, and a bunch of others. And across the rest of Europe, also a number of new space companies raising money and doing cool stuff. So there's really, there's a shift the last years, and as was talked about before, and we're definitely happy about that.
Yeah, I think so too. There is a lot going on right now in Europe because, we are training the US, but you already see it in Germany in the coalition contract. They put new space now in that the government should invest there. You also see it at ESA now with the generation of the Directorate for Commercialization. So it's starting. The question is just how quickly can it be realized, but I think it's also coming to Europe. That's why we're also happy to be in Europe.
And there's more money coming into Europe as well. I've been an advisor to NATO's Innovation Accelerator Fund, which comes live, I think, next year. So a huge amount of money is being attracted to this fund, and so-called dual-use technology. So space, whether we like it or not, can be used for defense and security purposes. And NATO, of course, are very mindful of the benefits of space technology. So there's a lot of money becoming available for dual-use technology, and it's specifically focused on disruptive innovations. So they're very keen to talk to startup entrepreneurs and new companies that could bring a technology edge to NATO. And I'm not able to say in public the volume of money behind the fund, but it's going to be very pleasing, shall we say, to the space sector from next year.
I would like to give a small perspective from HR-wise. If you look at the US, for example, as a company building a launcher, you can only hire people from the US. So your talent pool is just limited to a single country. Whereas we in Europe, we can really employ anyone. And we have even employed people from the US. We have one test engineer from Blue Origin. So it's really a big advantage to be in Europe and not in the US. Just if you look at the talent pool you can acquire in your company, because there is no limitation under ITAR here, and it's very nice. It's a very nice place to live. If we talk to our friends and employees here coming up from Europe, they just love it. You have a very nice living standard. Everything is sorted. They love to be in Germany because within a 3-hour flight you can be anywhere in Europe. And I think this is really a nice mixture here, having the talent pool, having also a nice living conditions, and yeah, and like Thomas said, with more money coming from the institutions, hopefully.
So we're beginning to come to the end here. Do anyone of you have to go at 4 a.m. sharp, or can we go to audience questions? Maybe like 10 minutes over time.
Well, unfortunately, I think I will have to go sharp.
I can do another 5 minutes or so.
Closing.
All right, so every minute is appreciated. Otherwise, we would at least go for one of them starting off here.
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
All right, so on a bit more of the competition with established companies, large established companies like Ariane Group. They just announced 2 days ago, I think, that they are trying to make a reusable micro launcher. And since we have 2 rocket companies already here, what is your take on this competition? How can you beat such a established company such as Arianespace?
Ibrahim, do you want to start, or do you want me to go?
As a French company, I would love to hear your opinion on that.
Okay, that's great. So yeah, I think that's very important to have competition, even in Europe. We already have some competition out of Europe with Astra, for example, on our side. But it's very important to have competition also in Europe, because that's how you create innovation. As long as it's fair competition, I think that's the most important thing. It has to be. But also, you do not only have the competition, you have the cooperation. For example, today we already work with the CNES and with Ariane Group. But yeah, I would say the competition, even with the CNES, would be very interesting, because it will bring us, I would say, interests, funds. It will bring us also more innovations. And in the end, I would say, as it's a fair competition, as long as I've heard about it, so the better will just win, and that's it.
So we had the CEO Amaya, is the company called, I guess. We had him already here at Rocket Factory. Gave him a tour, of course, not through the clean room with all the engine technology, but we had a very nice discussion on it. And I think having a big established player going into this field just shows that we are on the right direction, and others have realized this too, good 3 years after us. But nevertheless, it shows that this is really not just a niche, but this is really complementing the launcher portfolio which Europe already has, and the competition is open, and we really look forward to it. So getting up to orbit will also be hard for them, not just for us. And let's see how this evolves in future. So we're really looking forward to that.
And I would just say it's pretty much exciting also to have this competition right now in Europe.
All right, so let's have one last question, a closing question from someone in the audience. So this person has an engineering background and he wants to start a business but does not have any business background. And this entire topic seems very confusing and also intimidating. How should this person proceed? Like, should this person learn about business, or should this person maybe found a co-founder with the respective background? What is your opinion on this question?
As my time is rapidly running out, you touched on it. Find a co-founder with business experience. Don't waste your time becoming a theoretical expert on business, because real life is always different. It's a bit like, you know, learning to drive a car. You don't learn to drive a car by sitting down reading books on how to drive a car. You get behind the wheel as soon as you can and start driving. So I would say find someone who you can trust, someone you can work with, to bring the skills that you don't have on the commercial side, and go into business. I did exactly the same, but in reverse. I wanted to start a space business doing deployable antenna systems. What the hell do I know about antennas? I just spotted the opportunity. So I convinced very technically smart people, including my co-founder, to bring the technical skills that I didn't have. And I could bring that together with the entrepreneurial skills. So yeah, find the co-founder.
Yeah, I can also jump quickly on here, because we made it the other way around. We are also we are all engineers that started it. And the thing is that, we know best how the technology works, and we saw a market for that. And you don't need to start with already setting out your company plans for building a 1,000 person company. So start with small bits, and then you achieve it more and more, and then at one point, get a co-founder that is good in doing these business things, and you can focus more on the technology.
Yeah, and don't sit around and wait. Just go for it. Even if you haven't found the right people yet, things will work themselves out along the way. And maybe find some grants to apply to get started. So you don't spend too much of your own money and get stuck in some kind of difficult situation for yourself while you're trying to build a startup. That's another thing.
All right, that was a wonderful insight. So we see the time is up. We would love to talk for another 2 hours, but we know you have businesses to run. Fair enough. So thank you all very, very much for joining us. It was a blast for me, and I assume for everyone who we had the pleasure to be part of this. For the audience, I'm sure you will hear most of all these companies more in the future, but otherwise see their social media and see what they are up to currently. And this is from our side signing off. Thank you very much again, and I hope everyone enjoyed the little get together. Nice.
Thank you very much, people.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thanks also from me. Thanks for the invitation. Great panel.
Yeah, and thank you for the organization. Very well done. See you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.